The mechanic's vengeance, a love forged in fire. When a luxury car crashes into mechanic Ethan Cole's quiet garage, he never expected the bleeding woman inside to be Isabella Grant, a powerful CEO running from armed kidnappers. But what shocks everyone is what happens next. This humble, small-town mechanic transforms into a lethal protector, revealing skills that could only come from one place: the shadows of war. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this tale of love and redemption has traveled. The screech of tires against asphalt shattered the peaceful morning silence of Millbrook's main street, like a gunshot through a prayer. Ethan Cole's weathered hands paused mid-wrench as the sound echoed through his cluttered auto shop, followed immediately by the thunderous crash of metal meeting brick. His garage door had been reduced to twisted scrap in seconds. Through the settling dust and steam, a midnight black Mercedes S-Class sat embedded in what used to be his tool cabinet. Its front end crumpled like an accordion. The acrid smell of antifreeze and burning rubber filled the air, mixing with something else, something that made Ethan's trained instincts suddenly snap to attention. Fear. Pure, desperate fear. "Help me. Please." The voice was barely a whisper, feminine and refined despite its desperation. Ethan moved toward the wreckage with the fluid, silent grace of a man who had learned long ago that noise could mean death. His worn work boots crunched over broken glass as he approached the driver's side. Inside, slumped over the steering wheel, was a woman who clearly didn't belong in Millbrook's blue-collar world. Even through her disheveled state, everything about her screamed wealth and power, from her perfectly tailored charcoal business suit to the diamond earrings that caught the fluorescent light. Her dark hair, once immaculately styled, now fell in waves around a face that was beautiful despite the terror etched across it. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, staining her porcelain skin. "Ma'am, don't move," Ethan said, his voice calm and authoritative in a way that seemed to surprise even him. "You might have neck injuries." Her eyes, striking green eyes that reminded him of deep forest pools, focused on him with an intensity that sent an unexpected jolt through his chest. There was intelligence there, sharp and calculating, even through the panic. "They're coming," she gasped, her manicured fingers clutching his forearm with surprising strength. I can't let them take me back." "Who's coming?" Ethan asked, but he was already scanning the street beyond his ruined garage door. His trained eye caught movement in the shadows, dark shapes positioning themselves with military precision. That's when he heard it, the low rumble of multiple engines approaching fast. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice dropping to the same tone he'd once used to brief fellow SEALs before dangerous missions. "I'm going to help you out of this car, and then we're going to move to the back of the shop. Can you walk?" She nodded, though her hands were shaking. As Ethan carefully extracted her from the wreckage, he couldn't help but notice how she moved like someone accustomed to boardrooms and power lunches, not life-or-death situations. Yet there was something else, a steely determination in her eyes, that spoke of inner strength. "What's your name?" he asked as he guided her toward the rear of the shop, one arm supporting her weight. "Isabella," she breathed. "Isabella Grant." The name hit him like ice water. Isabella Grant, CEO of Grant Dynamics, one of the largest defense contractors in the country. He'd seen her face on business magazines and news reports. But what was a billionaire CEO doing crashing into his small-town garage, bleeding and terrified? The rumble of engines grew closer, and Ethan's military instincts kicked into overdrive. Through the gaps in his damaged garage door, he could see 3 black SUVs forming a perimeter around his shop. Professional, coordinated, deadly. "Isabella, I need you to tell me what's happening," he said, guiding her behind a heavy workbench. "Who are those people?" "I don't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was leaving the morning board meeting, when they tried to take me in the parking garage. I managed to get to my car, but they followed me. I've been driving for over an hour trying to lose them. And you ended up here. I couldn't think straight. I just kept driving until... She gestured helplessly at the destruction around them. Ethan's mind was racing, calculating odds and escape routes the way he'd been trained to do in Afghanistan. 3 vehicles, probably 12 men minimum. Unknown armament. 1 injured civilian. No backup. The odds were not in their favor. Stay low, he ordered, moving to a cabinet that looked like it contained nothing but spare parts. With practiced efficiency, he opened a hidden compartment and withdrew something that would have shocked anyone who knew him as just a simple mechanic. A Sig Sauer P-226, military issue. And from the way he handled it, checking the magazine, chambering around with fluid precision, it was clear this wasn't his first rodeo. Isabella's eyes widened. You're not just a mechanic. Long story, Ethan said grimly. Right now we focus on keeping you alive. The sound of car doors slamming echoed from outside, followed by voices speaking in clipped professional tones. Ethan counted at least 6 distinct speakers, all male, all using tactical terminology. Target is inside the structure. Alpha team take the front. Bravo team circle to the rear. Remember, we need her alive. Collateral damage is acceptable. Ethan's blood ran cold. Collateral damage. They were talking about him. Isabella, he whispered urgently. I need you to listen very carefully. These men are professionals, and they're here to take you. I don't know why, but I'm not going to let that happen. Do you understand? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Why are you helping me? You don't even know me. For a moment, Ethan's carefully controlled facade cracked, and she glimpsed something raw and painful in his eyes. Because a long time ago, I failed to protect someone who needed me. I won't make that mistake again. Before she could respond, the first gunman appeared in the destroyed doorway. He was tall and lean, dressed in tactical black, with the kind of dead eyes that came from too many kills. His assault rifle swept the garage, methodically searching for targets. Ethan had already positioned himself with a clear sight line. One shot. Clean, professional. The gunman dropped without a sound. Jesus Christ! Isabella gasped. Stay quiet! Ethan hissed, already moving to a new position as shouts erupted from outside. Alpha 1 is down. Repeat, Alpha 1 is down. All units converge on the building. Target is armed and dangerous. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse that showcased skills Ethan had hoped never to use again. He moved through his own garage like a ghost, using every piece of equipment, every shadow, every angle to his advantage. Years of muscle memory took over. Duck, aim, fire, move. The second gunman fell as he tried to flank around a hydraulic lift. The third made the mistake of silhouetting himself against the bright doorway. But they kept coming. There's too many of them, Isabella whispered as bullets sparked off metal around their position. Maybe, Ethan said, reloading with practiced efficiency. But they made one critical mistake. What's that? His smile was cold and predatory. They cornered a man who has nothing left to lose. He was about to make his next move when a voice called out from the street, a voice that made his blood freeze in his veins. Ethan Cole, Staff Sergeant 3rd Battalion 75th Rangers, Afghanistan 2019. I know you're in there. The voice was cultured with just a hint of an accent. British, maybe. Or educated American trying to sound sophisticated. Who is that? Isabella whispered. Ethan's jaw clenched so hard she could hear his teeth grinding. Someone who should be dead. Mr. Cole, I'm going to make this very simple. You have something that belongs to me. Send her out, and I'll let you live. Continue to interfere, and I'll have my men burn this building down around you." "Don't listen to him," Isabella said urgently. "Please, I can't go back." "What aren't you telling me?" Ethan demanded, his eyes never leaving the doorway. "Why do they want you so badly?" Isabella's composure finally cracked completely. "Because I found out about Nightfall." Nightfall, a classified defense project. Autonomous weapons systems with AI targeting. I discovered that someone in the company has been selling the technology to foreign buyers. When I tried to expose it, she gestured helplessly. They decided to eliminate the problem. Not eliminate, control. They need me alive to authorize certain transactions, to provide security clearances, but they can't let me talk. Ethan absorbed this information with the analytical mind of a soldier. A defense contractor CEO with knowledge of classified weapons sales. No wonder they wanted her badly enough to risk a daylight assault in a small town. "Mr. Cole," the voice called again, closer now. "I'm going to count to 10. Then my men are coming in with flame units." "We need to move," Ethan said. "There's a back exit through the office. My truck is parked behind the building." "What about them? What about them?" Isabella stared at him in amazement. "You're really going to take on all of them? I've faced worse odds." When his eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw past the calm exterior to the pain beneath. "The day I lost my entire team because I trusted the wrong person." Before she could ask what he meant, automatic gunfire erupted from multiple directions. The remaining windows in the garage exploded inward, showering them with glass. "Move now!" Ethan shouted. They ran in a crouch toward the office bullets whining around them. Ethan laid down, covering fire, his shots precise and economical. Every bullet found its mark, but more men kept appearing. As they reached the office door, Isabella stumbled, crying out. Blood was spreading across her shoulder. "I'm hit!" she gasped. "How bad?" "I don't know. It burns." Ethan risked a glance. Through and through, high on the shoulder. Painful, but not life-threatening, if they could stop the bleeding. "You'll live," he said grimly. "But we need to keep moving." The office was small and cluttered, filled with invoices and coffee-stained paperwork. But it also contained something else, a gun safe that looked far more sophisticated than anything a small-town mechanic should own. Ethan spun the combination lock with practiced ease, revealing an arsenal that made Isabella's eyes widen. Military-grade weapons, body armor, and what looked like enough explosives to level a city block. "Who are you really?" she whispered. "Someone who made a lot of enemies," he said, strapping on a tactical vest and grabbing an assault rifle. "Someone who's been hiding from his past for too long." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the garage. They were running out of time. "The truck," Ethan said, pointing toward the back door. "Black Ford F-150. Keys are in the ignition." "What about you? I'll be right behind you." But as Isabella reached for the door handle, it exploded inward. A figure in black tactical gear filled the doorway, rifle raised. Ethan's shot took him center mass, but not before the man's dying finger squeezed his trigger. The burst caught Ethan in the side, spinning him around and sending him crashing into the wall. "Ethan!" Isabella screamed. "Go!" he gasped, blood spreading across his shirt. "Get to the truck!" But she didn't go. Instead, she grabbed the fallen gunman's rifle and positioned herself to cover the doorway. The CEO, who'd never held a weapon in her life, suddenly moved with deadly purpose. "I'm not leaving you," she said firmly. The determination in her voice reminded him of someone from a long time ago, someone he'd failed to save. "You don't understand," he said, struggling to his feet. When they said they'd burn this place down, they weren't being metaphorical. As if summoned by his words, the smell of gasoline suddenly filled the air. They're going to torch the building, Isabella realized, with us inside. Outside, that cultured voice called out one last time. Mr. Cole, you have 30 seconds before this building becomes your crematorium. I suggest you reconsider your position. Ethan looked at Isabella, this powerful woman who'd stumbled into his life and turned it upside down in the space of an hour. Blood from her shoulder wound had stained her expensive suit. Her hair was disheveled and her makeup was streaked with tears. But her eyes blazed with the kind of fierce determination he'd only seen in his fellow warriors. "Stay close to me," he said, "and whatever happens, don't let go of my hand." She nodded, and he felt her fingers intertwine with his. Her grip was strong, steady, despite everything she'd been through. "On 3, he said. "We go out the back low and fast. The truck is 20 feet from the door. You get there no matter what happens to me. Ethan, promise me." She looked into his eyes and saw something there that made her breath catch. Not just determination, but something deeper. Something that spoke of second chances and redemption. "I promise," she whispered. 1. The smell of gasoline grew stronger. 2. He squeezed her hand, feeling her pulse racing beneath his fingers. 3. They burst through the back door just as flames began licking at the front of the building. The truck was exactly where he'd said it would be, a beast of black metal and chrome that looked like it could drive through a war zone. Which Ethan reflected as bullets began chasing them across the yard, was exactly what they were about to do. Isabella reached the passenger door first, yanking it open and diving inside. Ethan was right behind her, but as he grabbed the driver's door handle, a voice stopped him cold. "Hello, Ethan." He turned slowly, knowing what he would see, but hoping he was wrong. Standing 20 feet away, flanked by 4 armed men, was a figure from his worst nightmares. Tall and distinguished, with silver hair and cold blue eyes, wearing an expensive suit that somehow made him look more dangerous than any tactical gear. Colonel Victor Chen, the man who'd destroyed his life, his team, and his faith in everything he'd once believed in. "You son of a bitch," Ethan breathed. Chen smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. Now, Sergeant. Is that any way to greet an old friend? Friends don't get their men killed for money." "Ah, but that's where you're wrong. In our business, everyone is expendable. Your team understood that even if you never did." Isabella was staring between them, her face pale with understanding. "You two know each other." "Oh, we know each other very well," Chen said smoothly. "Ethan here used to work for me, until he developed a conscience." "You sold us out," Ethan snarled. 12 good men died because of your greed. 12 men died because you refused to follow orders. If you'd eliminated the target as instructed instead of trying to play hero, they'd still be alive. The words hit Ethan like physical blows, reopening wounds that had never properly healed. He could see his teammates' faces in his mind, could hear their voices calling for backup that never came. "The target was a child," he said quietly. "The target was a security risk. She was 8 years old." Chen shrugged. "Children grow up. This one would have grown up to be our enemy." Isabella made a sound of disgust. "You're talking about murdering a child." "I'm talking about preventing a war," Chen replied calmly. "But Sergeant Cole here couldn't see the bigger picture. His sentimentality cost us valuable intelligence and 12 trained operators." "It cost us our souls," Ethan said. "Souls are a luxury we can't afford in this business, as you well know." Chen's eyes fixed on Isabella with predatory intensity, just as Ms. Des Grant here is about to learn. What do you want with her? The same thing I wanted with that little girl in Kandahar. To clean up loose ends before they become problems. Isabella stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly despite the fear in her eyes. I'll never authorize those transactions. I'll never give you what you need. Oh, my dear, Chen said with mock sympathy. You misunderstand. I don't need your authorization. I need your biometric data and security clearances, both of which can be extracted from you whether you're conscious or not. The casual way he said it made Ethan's blood run cold. This was the man he'd once called Sir, once trusted with his life and the lives of his men. A man who saw human beings as nothing more than resources to be exploited. Let her go, Chen, Ethan said. This is between you and me. Is it? How deliciously naive. Ms. Grant discovered something she shouldn't have. Just like that little girl in Afghanistan knew something she shouldn't have. The only difference is that this time you don't have a team of rangers backing you up. No, Ethan said quietly, raising his rifle. But I don't need them. What happened next would be burned into Isabella's memory forever. She'd seen action movies, had watched countless fictional heroes engage in impossible gunfights. But this wasn't fiction. This was a man who'd been forged in the crucible of war, tempered by loss and guilt, and driven by a need for redemption that ran deeper than any ocean. Ethan moved like liquid lightning, diving left as his rifle came up. Chen's men were professionals, but they were prepared for a desperate last stand from a washed-up soldier. They weren't prepared for this, for someone who fought like death itself. The first man went down before he could fully raise his weapon. The second managed to get off a burst that went wide as Ethan's return fire found its mark. The third and fourth tried to flank, but Ethan was already moving, using the truck as cover, while his shots found gaps in their tactical armor with surgical precision. In 15 seconds, it was over. 4 men lay dead, and Colonel Chen stood alone, his composed facade finally cracking to reveal the fear beneath. Impossible, he breathed. You're just a broken-down mechanic. I'm a United States Army Ranger, Ethan said, his rifle trained on Chen's chest. And you killed my brothers. For a moment, Isabella thought he was going to pull the trigger. The rage in his eyes was terrible to behold, a fury that had been building for years and finally found its target. But then his finger moved away from the trigger. No, he said quietly. They deserve better than that. Chen's relief was palpable. I knew you were too weak to... The shot came from behind him. Chen's eyes widened in shock as he looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, then turned to see Isabella holding the fallen gunman's pistol, her hands steady despite everything she'd been through. I'm not, she said simply. Chen collapsed to his knees, then fell forward into the dirt. The man who'd orchestrated the deaths of 12 soldiers and countless others would never hurt anyone again. Ethan stared at her in amazement. Isabella, he was going to keep coming, she said, lowering the weapon. Men like that never stop. They just find new ways to hurt people. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching. Someone had called in the firefight, and soon this place would be crawling with police federal agents and questions neither of them were prepared to answer. We need to go, Ethan said. Where? He looked at her, this remarkable woman who'd fallen into his life like a meteor, beautiful and dangerous and utterly unexpected. Her shoulder was still bleeding, her expensive clothes were ruined, and she'd just killed a man to save them both. But her eyes held no regret, only determination. I don't know, he admitted. But wherever it is, we go together. Isabella nodded, understanding passing between them without words. Whatever came next, whatever dangers still waited in the shadows, they would face them as they had faced this together. As they climbed into the truck and drove away from the burning garage, leaving behind the bodies and the questions and the life Ethan had tried to build in this small town, Isabella reached over and took his hand. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For not letting them take me. For fighting when you could have just walked away." Ethan glanced at her, this woman who'd changed everything in the space of a single morning. "I told you before I failed to protect someone once. I wasn't going to make that mistake again." "Who was she? The person you failed to protect?" His hands tightened on the steering wheel, and for a moment, Isabella thought he wouldn't answer. Then, so quietly, she almost missed it, he said, "A little girl who trusted me to keep her safe. Her name was Amara." Isabella felt her heart clench at the pain in his voice. "What happened to her?" "Chen ordered me to eliminate her because she'd witnessed a weapons transfer we were investigating. When I refused, he sent my team into an ambush. They died trying to extract her." His voice broke slightly. "She died too in the end. Chen's people found her after we were gone." Now Isabella understood the weight he'd been carrying all these years. The guilt, the self-imposed exile, the decision to hide away in a small town fixing cars instead of living. "It wasn't your fault," she said firmly. "Wasn't it? You chose to protect an innocent child over following an illegal order. Your team died because of Chen's betrayal, not your conscience." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. Finally, he said, "Maybe, but that doesn't bring them back." "No," Isabella agreed, "but it means their sacrifice meant something. They died protecting innocence, just like you've been protecting me." As they drove toward an uncertain future, the burning garage disappearing in the rearview mirror, both of them carried wounds that would take time to heal. But for the first time in years, neither of them was facing their demons alone. The road stretched out before them, leading away from the small town of Millbrook and toward whatever destiny awaited. Behind them lay death and destruction, betrayal and loss. Ahead lay the unknown, fraught with danger, but also perhaps redemption. Isabella squeezed Ethan's hand, feeling calluses from years of honest work, mixed with scars from a warrior's life. In the space of a few hours, this man had risked everything to save her, not because he knew her or owed her anything, but simply because it was right. And she had killed to save him. The realization should have horrified her. Isabella Grant, CEO and pillar of the business community, had taken a life without hesitation. But as she looked at Ethan's profile, strong and determined, despite the pain she could see in his eyes, she felt no regret. Only a fierce protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. Whatever came next, whoever else might be hunting them, they would face it together. Two souls damaged by betrayal and loss, finding in each other something they'd thought was lost forever. Hope. As the miles rolled by and the sun climbed higher in the sky, Isabella Grant and Ethan Cole drove toward a future neither could predict, bound together by shared danger and the beginning of something that might in time become love. The safe house Ethan had mentioned turned out to be a cabin tucked deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains, accessible only by a winding dirt road that seemed to disappear into the forest itself. As they pulled up to the rustic structure 3 hours after fleeing Millbrook, Isabella realized this wasn't some random hideout. This was personal. "You've been here before," she observed, watching how naturally he navigated the overgrown path. "I built it," Ethan said quietly, cutting the engine. "After I came back from overseas. Needed somewhere to..." He trailed off, then simply said, needed somewhere quiet. The cabin was modest but well constructed with weathered cedar siding and a wraparound porch that spoke of careful craftsmanship. Solar panels glinted on the roof, and Isabella could see the glint of water through the trees, a stream or small lake. "It's beautiful," she said, and meant it. "It's isolated. No cell towers for 20 miles, no neighbors, no way to track us here." His voice was all business, but she caught the way his shoulders relaxed slightly as they approached the front door. This place meant something to him. Inside the cabin was spartanly furnished but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flanked by bookshelves filled with military histories and mechanical manuals. The kitchen was small but functional, and through an open doorway she could see a bedroom with a simple bed and dresser. "There's a first aid kit in the bathroom," Ethan said, noticing how she favored her injured shoulder. "We need to clean that wound properly." Isabella nodded suddenly, aware of how much blood had soaked through her blouse. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the firefight was beginning to fade, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and the sharp ache of her injury. The bathroom was as simple as the rest of the cabin, but the first aid kit was military-grade and comprehensive. Ethan worked with practiced efficiency, cutting away the ruined fabric of her blouse to expose the wound. "This might hurt," he warned, but his touch was gentle as he began cleaning the entry and exit wounds. Isabella bit her lip, trying not to flinch. "You've done this before. Too many times." His voice was grim. "Bullet went clean through. You're lucky a few inches lower, and it would have hit the subclavian artery. How lucky can I be? I'm being hunted by people who want to torture me for corporate secrets, and I just killed a man." Ethan's hands stilled for a moment. Having second thoughts about Chen. Isabella met his eyes in the mirror above the sink. "No. He would have killed you without hesitation. Probably would have made me watch." She paused, then added quietly, "I've never killed anyone before today. How do you feel about it?" She considered the question seriously. "I should feel guilty, shouldn't I? Horrified at what I've done. Should doesn't matter. How do you actually feel?" "Relief," she admitted. "And that scares me more than anything else." Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "The first time I killed someone, I threw up for an hour afterward. But it gets easier, and that's what's really terrifying. Not the act itself, but how quickly you adapt to it." "Is that what happened to you? You adapted?" His hands resumed their work, applying antiseptic with careful precision. "I adapted to war. Took me years to adapt to peace." Isabella studied his reflection, noting the way his jaw tightened when he mentioned peace. "Is that what this is for you, peace?" It was. He began wrapping her shoulder with gauze. "Until today." "I'm sorry. I never meant to drag you into this." "You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose to help you." "Why?" The question hung between them as he finished bandaging her wound. When he was done, his hands lingered on her shoulders, warm and reassuring, through the thin material of her camisole. "Because when I looked at you in that car, bleeding and terrified, all I could think about was Amara. How she looked at me with those big brown eyes, trusting me to keep her safe." His voice grew rough. "I couldn't save her, but maybe I could save you." Isabella turned to face him, their bodies suddenly close in the small bathroom. She could see the pain in his eyes, the guilt he carried like a physical weight. "You did save me," she said softly. "You saved my life." "At what cost? Your home, your life, your career. It's all gone now. Chen might be dead, but Project Nightfall is still out there. The people behind it won't just give up." "Then we stop them." Ethan shook his head. There is no we. You need to disappear, Isabella. New identity, new life somewhere they can never find you. And you, I'll figure something out. Isabella reached up her uninjured hand, cupping his cheek. The gesture was intimate, unexpected, and it sent a jolt of electricity through both of them. I'm not running, she said firmly. Not anymore. You don't understand the kind of people we're dealing with. I understand perfectly. I've been dealing with men like Chen my entire career. They think they can intimidate me, control me, use me, but I'm done being a victim. The fire in her eyes reminded him why she'd become one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. This wasn't just a frightened woman anymore. This was a force of nature. What are you proposing? He asked. We fight back. We expose Project Nightfall, bring down everyone involved, and make sure they can never hurt anyone else. That's not a plan, that's a suicide mission. Maybe, but I'd rather die fighting than spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. Ethan studied her face, seeing the determination there. You realize what you're asking. These people have unlimited resources, government connections, military contractors. They can make us disappear without a trace. They tried that today. How did that work out for them? Despite everything, Ethan found himself almost smiling. You killed their operational commander, and I took out 6 of their men. I don't think they expected that level of resistance. Then we have an advantage. They underestimated us, once they'll do it again. And if they don't, if they come at us with everything they have, Isabella stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his, then at least we'll face it together. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. But the connection was there, forged in violence and sealed with shared blood. They were no longer strangers thrown together by circumstance, they were partners bound by trust and growing affection. Ethan's hand covered hers where it rested against his cheek. You should rest. That shoulder needs time to heal. I should. But first I need to understand what we're really up against. They moved to the living room where Ethan built a fire while Isabella settled onto the worn leather couch. The flames cast dancing shadows across the walls, creating an atmosphere of intimacy that neither acknowledged but both felt. Tell me about Project Nightfall, Ethan said, settling beside her. Not too close, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Isabella was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. It started as a legitimate defense project. Autonomous weapons systems for force protection. Think of them as smart sentries that could identify and engage threats without human operators. Sounds reasonable. It was in theory, but the AI learning algorithms were more advanced than anything we'd developed before. They could adapt, evolve, make decisions based on probability matrices and threat assessment protocols. And someone decided to sell this technology. Not just sell it, weaponize it beyond anything the original contracts specified. The systems I discovered weren't defensive. They were designed for offensive operations, capable of autonomous target selection and elimination. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. You're talking about killer robots. I'm talking about artificial intelligence that can decide who lives and who dies, then act on those decisions without human oversight. And according to the files I found, prototype units have already been deployed. Where? That's what I was trying to find out when Chen's people came for me. But based on the financial records, I believe they've been testing them in conflict zones where accountability is flexible. The implications hit Ethan like a physical blow. Autonomous weapons systems in the hands of the highest bidder, capable of carrying out assassinations and military operations without human control or oversight. Jesus, he breathed. How many people know about this phone? That's just it. I don't think many people do. The project was compartmentalized, need-to-know basis only. I only discovered it because I was conducting an audit of our defense contracts and noticed some irregularities in the funding streams. What kind of irregularities? Payments to shell companies, unauthorized technology transfers, research funding that didn't match up with any official programs. Isabella's voice grew angry. Someone was using my company as a front for selling weapons to foreign actors. Any idea who? Chen, obviously. But he had to have help from inside Grant Dynamics. Someone with high-level access and security clearance. Ethan considered this. Who else knew you were investigating? That's what's been eating at me. I was very careful, very discreet. I didn't even use my office computer. I accessed everything from my personal laptop at home. She paused, realization dawning in her eyes. Unless, what? My security chief, Marcus Webb. He installed the security software on all my personal devices, said it was necessary to protect company data. And you think he was monitoring your activities? It would explain how they knew exactly when and where to ambush me. I left for the office that morning on the spur of the moment. There was no way they could have known unless they were tracking me in real time. Ethan's expression darkened. So we have a mole inside your company. Chen's people are still out there, and somewhere there are autonomous weapon systems that could be used against anyone. That about sums it up. And your plan is to take on this entire conspiracy with what the two of us and whatever weapons I have stashed in this cabin. Isabella turned to look at him directly, her green eyes fierce with determination. You said you failed to save that little girl, that your team died because of Chen's betrayal. This is your chance to make that right. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been hiding up here for years, punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault. But now we have a chance to expose the truth, to make sure Chen's death actually means something. And if we die trying, then we die for something worth dying for. The conviction in her voice was absolute, and Ethan found himself remembering why he'd become a soldier in the first place. Not for glory or adventure, but to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. There's something else, Isabella said quietly. Something I haven't told you. What? When I was going through the Nightfall files, I found references to previous operations. Test runs, they called them. Small-scale deployments to evaluate system performance. Where? Afghanistan. 3 years ago. A village called Kandahar. Ethan's blood turned to ice. What kind of operation? Target elimination. According to the files, they were testing the AI's ability to identify and eliminate high-value targets in urban environments. What was the target? Isabella's voice was barely above a whisper. A young girl suspected of providing intelligence to American forces. The world seemed to stop spinning. Ethan stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she'd just told him. Amara, he breathed. The file didn't have a name, just an age and description. 8 years old local villager eliminated by autonomous weapons system during field test. Ethan stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His hands were shaking, and Isabella could see the muscles in his jaw working as he fought to maintain control. She wasn't killed in the ambush, he said finally. She was murdered by one of Chen's machines. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. All these years, I thought. I blamed myself for not getting to her fast enough. But she was never meant to survive. She was just a test subject for their fucking robots. The anguish in his voice broke Isabella's heart. She stood moving to stand beside him at the window. We can't change what happened to her, she said gently. But we can make sure it never happens to another child. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dark forest. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and hard. "What do you need from me?" "I need a soldier. Someone who knows how to fight a war." "This isn't a war, Isabella. It's a vendetta." "Is there a difference?" He turned to look at her, and she was struck by the transformation in his features. The gentle mechanic who'd bandaged her wounds was gone, replaced by something much more dangerous. "No," he said quietly. "I don't suppose there is." Over the next hour, they began to plan. Isabella had kept backup copies of some of the Nightfall files on an encrypted drive hidden in her apartment in D.C. If they could retrieve it, they might have enough evidence to expose the conspiracy. "The apartment will be watched," Ethan warned. "I know, but the drive is hidden in a place they'd never think to look." "Where?" "Inside the binding of a cookbook on my kitchen shelf. The Joy of Cooking, a 3rd edition. The pages are hollowed out." "Clever." "I learned some things from my ex-husband. He was CIA." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You were married to a spook." "For 3 years. It didn't end well, but I picked up a few tricks." "What happened?" Isabella was quiet for a moment. "He couldn't handle that I made more money than him. Couldn't stand that his wife was more successful than he was. The marriage fell apart when he tried to sabotage a major defense contract I was negotiating." "He sounds like a real prize." "He was, but he taught me that in a world full of predators, sometimes you have to become one yourself to survive." As they talked, planning their assault on her apartment and the larger conspiracy beyond, Ethan found himself studying Isabella with new eyes. The frightened woman who'd crashed into his garage was still there, but she was buried beneath layers of steel and determination. This was someone who'd clawed her way to the top of a male-dominated industry and stayed there despite constant challenges to her authority. "You know," he said, "when I first saw you, I thought you were just another rich woman in trouble. And now I think you might be the most dangerous person I've ever met." Isabella smiled, the expression transforming her face. "Good, because we're going to need every advantage we can get." As the fire burned low and the night deepened around them, they continued to plan. But beneath the tactical discussions and strategic considerations, something else was building between them. Every accidental touch, every shared glance, every moment of vulnerability revealed in the flickering firelight was weaving threads of connection that neither quite acknowledged, but both felt. When Isabella finally dozed off on the couch, exhausted by blood loss and the day's trauma, Ethan covered her with a blanket and settled into the chair across from her. He should have been planning their next moves, considering contingencies and escape routes. Instead, he found himself watching her sleep. Her face, relaxed in slumber, was achingly beautiful. The harsh lines of stress and fear had softened, revealing the woman beneath the CEO facade. She looked younger, vulnerable, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a protectiveness that went beyond professional obligation. He'd told himself he was helping her because of Amara, because of his failure to save an innocent child. But watching her now, seeing the peaceful expression on her face, he realized there was more to it than that. Isabella Grant was getting under his skin in ways he hadn't expected and wasn't sure he could handle. A sound from someone outside brought him instantly alert. Barely audible, but his trained ears caught at the snap of a twig underfoot. Someone was in the woods around the cabin. Moving silently, Ethan retrieved his rifle from where he'd left it by the door. The safety was already off, around chambered and ready. Old habits died hard. Another sound closer this time. Definitely footsteps, trying to move quietly, but not quite succeeding. At least 2 people, possibly more, approaching from the north side of the cabin. Ethan considered waking Isabella, but decided against it. If this was a false alarm, she needed the rest. If it wasn't, Well, he'd handled worse odds. The first figure appeared at the edge of the tree line, visible for just a moment in the moonlight, before melting back into shadow. Professional movement, but not perfect. Whoever these people were, they weren't military. Corporate security, maybe, or private contractors hired to clean up Chen's mess. A second figure appeared, then a third. They were spreading out, taking positions around the cabin. Classic encirclement pattern designed to cut off all escape routes. Ethan smiled grimly. They were making the same mistake Chen's people had made, underestimating their target. Moving to the back bedroom, he opened a window that faced the stream. The water would mask any sounds he made moving through the forest, and the rocky stream bed would leave no tracks. Before leaving, he looked back at Isabella still sleeping peacefully on the couch. If something happened to him, she'd be alone and defenseless. The thought sent a spike of fear through him that was entirely professional and nothing more. At least that's what he told himself. The night air was cold against his skin as he slipped through the window and into the darkness beyond. Years of training took over his body, remembering how to move silently through hostile territory. The attackers were good, but they weren't rangers. They made small mistakes, a scuffed footstep here, a whispered communication there. Enough for Ethan to track their positions and plan his approach. The first man died without knowing what hit him. A blade between the ribs angled upward toward the heart, and he dropped silently into the underbrush. The second was more alert, starting to turn as Ethan approached. But not fast enough. A chokehold applied with ruthless efficiency, cutting off blood flow to the brain, and another threat was eliminated. The third man was the smart one. When his companions failed to check in, he began moving toward the cabin instead of searching the woods. Unfortunately for him, Ethan was already there, waiting in the shadows beside the front porch. "Looking for someone?" Ethan asked quietly, his rifle pressed against the man's neck. The intruder froze. "Easy, friend. No need for violence. I think that ship sailed when you decided to surround my home with armed men. Who sent you? Just following orders, man. Nothing personal." "Whose orders?" "Look, I don't know names. We got a call address and description instructions to retrieve a package and eliminate any resistance." "What kind of package?" "A woman. Corporate executive, probably injured. Alive was preferred but not required." Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle. "And the resistance? Anyone protecting her was to be terminated." "I see." The man must have heard something in Ethan's voice because he started to tense, preparing to fight or flee. He never got the chance. When Ethan returned to the cabin 15 minutes later, Isabella was awake, sitting up on the couch with the throw pillow clutched in her hands. "I heard noises," she said. "Just some animals moving through the woods. Nothing to worry about." She looked at him closely, noting the way he moved, the alertness in his posture. "You're lying." "Isabella, there were men out there, weren't there? They found us." Ethan sighed, realizing she was too intelligent to fool with comforting lies. 3 of them. Corporate security probably hired after Chen's death to clean up loose ends. "Are they?" "They won't be reporting back." Isabella absorbed this information with a calmness that surprised him. "How long do we have before more come?" "Maybe a few hours. Maybe less. We need to move." "Where?" "DC. If we're going to end this, we need that evidence." Isabella nodded, standing with determination despite her injury. "Then let's finish it." As they gathered their few belongings and prepared to leave the cabin, Ethan found himself thinking about the man he'd interrogated. 3 professionals sent to kill them both. Which meant the conspiracy behind Project Nightfall was bigger than just Chen and a few corrupt officials. They were walking into a war, and they were outnumbered by enemies they couldn't see or identify. But as he watched Isabella check the encryption on her backup drive with steady hands and cold eyes, Ethan realized something that both thrilled and terrified him. He was no longer fighting this battle alone. The drive to Washington, D.C. took them through the pre-dawn darkness of rural Virginia, their headlights carving tunnels through the mountain mist as they descended toward the interstate. Isabella had insisted on driving, despite her injured shoulder, claiming she knew the city better and could navigate the potential surveillance networks that might be watching for Ethan's truck. "There's something you should know," she said, as they merged onto I-66, the lights of distant suburbs beginning to twinkle through the darkness. "About my ex-husband." Ethan glanced at her profile, noting the tension in her jaw. "What about him?" "His name is Marcus Webb." The words hit Ethan like ice water. "Your security chief is your ex-husband." "I know how it sounds, but it wasn't nepotism. Marcus is genuinely good at his job, or was before he apparently decided to betray me." Her voice carried years of hurt and disappointment. "We tried to keep things professional after the divorce, but clearly that was a mistake." "How long have you suspected him?" "I didn't, not really. Not until tonight when I started putting the pieces together. The surveillance software he installed, his access to my schedule, his knowledge of company operations." She paused, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "God, I've been so stupid." "You trusted someone you loved. That's not stupid, it's human." "Is it, or is it just naive? Marcus knew about every board meeting, every business trip, every security protocol at Grant Dynamics. If he's been feeding information to Chen's people, then he's been planning this for a long time," Ethan finished grimly. They drove in silence for several miles, both lost in thought. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten, painting the horizon in shades of deep purple and gold. Soon it would be dawn, and with daylight would come increased visibility and danger. "Tell me about your marriage," Ethan said quietly. "Help me understand what we're dealing with." Isabella was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "We met at a defense industry conference 6 years ago. I was presenting on next-generation weapons systems, and he was working security for the event. He was charming, sophisticated, and he made me laugh, something I hadn't done much of since taking over the company." "What changed?" "Success. The more Grant Dynamics grew, the more resentful he became. He'd make little comments about how I was too focused on work or how I cared more about profits than people. But underneath it all, I could see what was really bothering him. Your success made him feel diminished." "Exactly. He couldn't handle being married to someone who made 10 times his salary and had more influence in defense circles than he ever would. The final straw came when I was selected to brief the Joint Chiefs on emerging technologies. Marcus wanted to be the one making those presentations, wanted to be the power behind the throne, instead of just the security consultant. Ethan could picture it clearly, a man's ego slowly poisoned by envy and resentment festering until it became something dangerous. "When did you realize he was working against you?" "I should have seen it sooner. Little things, meetings that got moved at the last minute, security protocols that seemed designed to restrict my movements, rather than protect me, background checks on potential business partners that always seemed to find problems." She shook her head. "I thought he was just being thorough, maybe a little overprotective because of our history. Instead, he was isolating you, making me dependent on his information, his analysis, his recommendations. By the time I started investigating Project Nightfall, he probably knew about it before I did." As they approached the D.C. metropolitan area, traffic began to thicken even in the early morning hours. Isabella guided them through the maze of highways with practiced ease. But Ethan could see the strain in her posture, the way she checked the mirrors obsessively. My apartment is in Georgetown, she said. Expensive neighborhood, good security, lots of foot traffic to blend into, but also exactly where they'd expect you to go. Right. So we're not going there directly. First, we need to visit an old friend of mine. Who? Someone who might be able to help us level the playing field. 20 minutes later, they pulled up outside a modest row house in Arlington, its red brick facade and small garden indistinguishable from dozens of others on the quiet residential street. But as they approached the front door, Ethan noticed details that suggested this was no ordinary suburban home. Security cameras, disguised as decorative fixtures, reinforced door frames, windows, with barely visible security film. Isabella knocked in a specific pattern, 3 short, 2 long, 1 short. After a moment, the door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and knowing eyes. Isabella Grant, the woman said with a slight accent Ethan couldn't place. I wondered when you'd show up on my doorstep. Hello, Katerina. We need your help. Katerina's eyes shifted to Ethan, taking in his military bearing and the controlled way he held himself. And who is your friend? Someone who's been keeping me alive. Katerina stepped back, allowing them to enter. Come in, and wipe your feet. I just cleaned the floors. The interior of the house was a study in controlled chaos. Every surface was covered with electronic equipment, computer monitors, and devices Ethan didn't recognize. Cables snaked across the floor, like technological vines, connecting terminals and servers in patterns that seemed random, but were clearly organized according to some system only their owner understood. Welcome to my little hobby shop, Katerina said with dry humor. Can I offer you coffee? You both look like you could use it. We don't have much time, Isabella said. Marcus Webb is a treacherous little snake who's been monitoring your communications for over a year, Katerina interrupted. Yes, I know. I've been tracking his activities since you asked me to audit your company's security systems last spring. Isabella stared at her. You knew, I suspected. The surveillance software he installed on your devices was more comprehensive than necessary for corporate security. It was designed to monitor not just external threats, but your personal activities as well. Why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't have believed me. You still had feelings for him, still trusted him, despite everything he'd done during your marriage. Katerina moved to one of her computer terminals, fingers flying across the keyboard. But now that Chen is dead, and Webb is presumably scrambling to cover his tracks, you're ready to hear the truth. What truth? That your ex-husband has been selling information to the highest bidder for nearly 2 years. Not just about you, but about every defense contractor and government official who's ever walked through your doors. The revelation hit Isabella like a physical blow. She sank into a chair, her face pale with shock and betrayal. He's been using me, she whispered. Using Grant Dynamics as a front for intelligence gathering. More than that. Katerina continued, her tone gentle despite the harsh reality of her words. He's been positioning himself to take over the company. Every move he's made, every piece of information he's gathered, has been designed to eliminate you as a factor and install himself as the new power behind Grant Dynamics. Ethan had been listening in silence, but now he spoke up. What's your connection to all this? Katerina smiled, the expression sharp and predatory. I'm what you might call a freelance information specialist. Isabella hired me to conduct security audits, but my real specialty is uncovering secrets that powerful people prefer to keep hidden. She's former Russian intelligence, Isabella explained. Defected 15 years ago and now works as a consultant for people who need to know things they're not supposed to know. Former FSB, Katerina corrected. And before you ask, Mr. Cole, yes, I know who you are as well. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole, 75th Rangers, dishonorably discharged after disobeying direct orders in Afghanistan. Currently living under an assumed identity in rural Virginia. Ethan's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, but Katerina held up a placating gesture. Relax. If I wanted to turn you in, I would have done it years ago. Your situation is actually quite useful for my purposes, a skilled operator with no official ties to any government agency. What kind of purposes? The kind that involve exposing conspiracies that threaten innocent lives. She turned back to Isabella. Tell me about Project Nightfall. Over the next hour, Isabella and Ethan laid out everything they knew. The autonomous weapons systems, the illegal sales to foreign actors, Chen's involvement, and Marcus's betrayal. Katerina listened with the focused attention of a professional intelligence analyst, occasionally asking questions that revealed how much she already knew about the various players involved. The situation is worse than you realize, she said finally. Nightfall isn't just about selling weapons technology. It's about destabilizing entire regions to create markets for those weapons. What do you mean? Isabella asked. Think about it logically. Autonomous weapons systems are most valuable in areas of active conflict. So if you're selling these systems, you need to ensure there are plenty of conflicts to justify their use. The implications hit Ethan immediately. They're not just selling weapons, they're creating the conditions where those weapons are necessary. Precisely. The civil unrest in Eastern Europe, the border conflicts in Southeast Asia, even some of the terrorist attacks in major cities, all carefully orchestrated to create demand for Nightfall technology. Isabella felt sick. How many people have died because of this conspiracy? Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. And if it continues, the number will grow exponentially. Then we stop it, Ethan said simply. Katerina smiled approvingly. I was hoping you'd say that. But first, you need to understand what you're really facing. She turned to her computer, pulling up files and images that made Isabella's blood run cold. Surveillance photos of government officials' financial records, showing massive money transfers, and most disturbing of all, footage of autonomous weapons systems in action. This is from a test deployment in Syria 3 months ago, Katerina narrated as they watched grainy video of robotic units moving through urban terrain. The target was a refugee camp suspected of harboring insurgents. The systems were programmed to identify and eliminate all military-age males in the area. Jesus, Ethan breathed, watching the mechanical efficiency with which the machines carried out their deadly task. 47 people died in that operation. Men, women, and children who had the misfortune to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Marcus knew about this. Marcus helped plan it. He provided the intelligence that designated the camp as a legitimate target. Isabella's hands were shaking with rage and disgust. I have to stop him. I have to stop all of them. That's where this becomes complicated, Katerina said. The conspiracy extends far beyond Marcus and Chen. We're talking about defense contractors, intelligence officials, military commanders, and politicians. People with the power to make you disappear permanently. Then what do you suggest? We give them a target they can't resist. Ethan didn't like the sound of that. What kind of target? You. Katerina looked directly at Isabella. They want you dead or under their control, so we let them think they're about to get what they want. Explain. Your apartment is almost certainly under surveillance. They're waiting for you to go there, probably hoping you'll lead them to any evidence you might have hidden. So we give them what they're expecting, but on our terms. A trap. Exactly. But first, we need to retrieve that encrypted drive and any other evidence you've hidden. Once we have proof of the conspiracy, we can use it as leverage. Isabella considered the plan, seeing both its potential and its dangers. It's risky. If something goes wrong, we'll all be dead anyway, Ethan pointed out grimly. At least this way we're taking the initiative. There's something else, Katerina said. Something you need to know about Marcus's current operations. She pulled up another set of files, these showing real-time intelligence about movement patterns and communication intercepts. He's not just working with what's left of Chen's organization. He's been building his own network, recruiting assets from within the intelligence community and defense establishment. According to my sources, he's planning something big, a false flag operation designed to justify massive military spending on autonomous weapons systems. What kind of operation? An attack on a high-value target, something that will shock the American public and demand immediate retaliation. The perfect excuse to deploy Nightfall systems on a massive scale. Ethan felt a chill of recognition. Like a terrorist attack, or an assassination. Someone important enough that their death would change the political landscape. Isabella's face went white. The Defense Secretary's Summit. It's scheduled for next week. All the major defense contractors, military leaders, and intelligence officials will be there. The perfect target, Katerina agreed. Maximum casualties, maximum political impact, and Marcus will be there as part of your company's security team. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. Marcus wasn't just trying to destroy Isabella's life, he was planning to use her company as the staging ground for a massacre that would reshape American defense policy. We have to warn them, Isabella said. Warn them of what? That a respected security consultant is planning a false flag attack based on information gathered by a former Russian spy and a dishonorably discharged soldier. Katerina shook her head. They'll never believe us without proof. Then we get proof. From your apartment. The encrypted drive you mentioned, does it contain information about the summit? Isabella thought carefully. It should. I was investigating funding anomalies related to all major defense projects, including budget allocations for upcoming events. Then that's our starting point. We retrieve the drive, analyze the data, and build an airtight case against Marcus and his co-conspirators. And if we're wrong about the summit, then we've prevented a conspiracy to sell illegal weapons to foreign actors. If we're right, Katerina's expression was grim, then we've potentially saved hundreds of lives. As they prepared to leave for Georgetown, Ethan found himself studying Isabella with new concern. The strain of the past 24 hours was beginning to show: the shoulder wound, the emotional trauma of Marcus's betrayal, and the weight of knowing that hundreds of lives might depend on their actions. "Are you sure you're up for this?" he asked quietly. "I have to be," she replied, but he could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "You could stay here with Katerina. Let me handle the apartment." Isabella's eyes flashed with determination. "That apartment is my home. Those files are my responsibility. And Marcus," her voice hardened, "Marcus is my problem to solve. He's dangerous, Isabella, more dangerous than you realize. So am I. You seem to keep forgetting that I killed Chen without hesitation. That was different. That was self-defense in the heat of the moment. This is personal." Isabella stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume beneath the scent of antiseptic and fear. "You're right. It is personal. This man destroyed my marriage, violated my trust, and used my company to facilitate mass murder. So yes, when we face him, it's going to be very personal." The intensity in her voice sent both excitement and concern coursing through Ethan's veins. This woman was transforming before his eyes, the corporate executive giving way to something much more dangerous. "Just promise me something," he said. "What?" Promise me that when the time comes, you'll let me handle Marcus. Don't let your anger make you reckless." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, studying his face. "You're worried about me." "I'm worried about both of us, but yes, especially you." "Why?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to address. But in the growing light of dawn, surrounded by the tools of espionage and surveillance, Ethan found himself giving the honest answer. "Because somewhere between that garage and this moment, you stopped being just someone I was protecting and became someone I—" He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. "Someone you what? Someone I can't afford to lose." The admission surprised them both with its honesty. Isabella felt something flutter in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the heated house and everything to do with the way Ethan was looking at her. "Ethan, I know. I know this isn't the time or place, and I know we're probably both going to be dead by the end of the week. But I needed you to know." Before Isabella could respond, Katerina cleared her throat behind them. "If you two are finished with your romantic moment, we have work to do, and time is running short." They broke apart, both slightly embarrassed by the intensity of the moment. But as they gathered their equipment and prepared for the dangerous mission ahead, each carried the memory of the other's words like a talisman against the darkness they were about to face. The drive to Georgetown took them through the heart of Washington, D.C., as the city awakened to another day. Government workers hurried to their offices, tourists consulted maps and guidebooks, and the everyday business of running the free world continued obliviously around them. Isabella's apartment building was a converted 19th-century mansion that had been divided into luxury condos, the kind of address that spoke of serious money and political connections. As they circled the block, conducting surveillance of their own, Ethan counted at least 3 suspicious vehicles and twice as many pedestrians who seemed to be lingering without purpose. "They're here," he said grimly. "How many? Hard to say. At least 6, maybe 8. Professional surveillance team, probably with backup units in the area." "Can we get past them?" "Maybe. Katerina, what's the building's security like?" "Standard electronic locks, camera system, doorman during business hours. But there's a service entrance in the rear that connects to the parking garage. Monitored by the same camera system, but the feeds can be looped if you know what you're doing." "Which you do." Katerina smiled. "Among other things." They spent the next hour conducting reconnaissance, mapping the surveillance pattern and identifying weaknesses in the watchers' coverage. The team watching the building was good, but not perfect. They'd positioned themselves to observe all the obvious approaches, but had left gaps that a careful observer could exploit. "There," Ethan said, pointing to a narrow alley that ran behind the neighboring buildings. "Service access for the whole block. We can approach from the south, use the construction scaffolding on the building 2 doors down to reach the roof level. And then, rappel down to Isabella's balcony, old-school breaking and entering." Isabella looked at him skeptically. "You want to break into my own apartment? Do you have a better idea?" "Actually, yes. I have keys." "Keys won't help if there's a welcome committee waiting inside." "True. But there's another way. The building has a private elevator that goes directly to the penthouse level. It requires a key card and biometric scan." "Which you have." "Which I have. And the elevator shaft has maintenance access points on every floor." Ethan began to see the plan. "We use the elevator maintenance system to bypass the lobby and hallway surveillance." "Exactly. But we'll need a distraction to keep the watchers focused on the main entrances." "Leave that to me," Katerina said. "I have some associates in the area who owe me favors." As they finalized their plan, Isabella felt a growing sense of dread about what they might find in her apartment. If Marcus had been monitoring her for as long as Katerina suspected, he would know about the hidden drive. He might have already retrieved it, or worse, replaced it with something that would incriminate her rather than exonerate her. But they had to try. The evidence hidden in that cookbook might be the only thing standing between Marcus and whatever catastrophe he was planning for the Defense Secretary's summit. "Ready?" Ethan asked, as they prepared to separate. Isabella nodded, checking the small pistol Katerina had provided for her. "As ready as I'll ever be. Remember, we're in and out. 5 minutes maximum. If something goes wrong, we improvise. No. If something goes wrong, you run. You get out of that building and you don't look back. What about you? I'll be right behind you." But the way he said it made Isabella suspect that Ethan was prepared to sacrifice himself to ensure her escape. The thought sent a spike of fear through her that had nothing to do with the danger they were facing and everything to do with the growing bond between them. "Ethan, I need you to promise me something too." "What?" "Promise me you won't try to be a hero. We both get out of this alive, or neither of us does." He looked at her a long moment, seeing the determination in her eyes that matched his own protective instincts. "Deal," he said finally. As they moved toward their destiny, neither of them spoke of the possibility that this might be their last conversation, their last moment together, before everything went wrong. But both of them carried the weight of unfinished business between them, words unspoken, feelings unexplored, a connection that had been forged in violence but might in another time and place have become something beautiful. The Georgetown streets seemed peaceful in the morning light, filled with the normal rhythms of urban life. But beneath that placid surface, deadly forces were converging on a luxury apartment where the future of American defense policy and the lives of hundreds of innocent people hung in the balance. As Isabella and Ethan prepared to risk everything for the chance to expose the truth, they carried with them not just weapons and equipment, but the growing realization that they had found something worth fighting for in each other. Whether that would be enough to see them through the trials ahead remained to be seen. The maintenance shaft of Isabella's apartment building was a cramped maze of pipes, electrical conduits, and service ladders that smelled of dust and old metal. Ethan moved through the narrow space with practiced efficiency, his body remembering the tight confines of similar infiltration routes from his military days. Behind him, Isabella followed with surprising grace for someone who'd probably never crawled through building infrastructure in her life. 2 more floors, he whispered over his shoulder, his voice barely audible above the hum of the building's ventilation system. Isabella's response was a soft touch on his ankle, their agreed-upon signal for acknowledgement. They'd been climbing for 10 minutes, using the building's service elevator shaft to bypass the lobby surveillance and the watchers positioned throughout the building's public areas. Below them, Katerina's distraction was working perfectly. Through the thin walls of the shaft, they could hear the commotion she'd orchestrated, a gas leak, reported by one of her associates, that had prompted the evacuation of the building's ground floor and drawn the surveillance team's attention away from the upper levels. When they reached Isabella's floor, Ethan carefully pried open the maintenance access panel and peered into the hallway beyond. Empty just as they'd hoped, the watchers were focused on the building's entrances, not expecting their target to already be inside. They slipped into the corridor with practiced stealth, moving toward Isabella's apartment at the far end of the hall. The luxury building's thick carpeting muffled their footsteps, and the morning light streaming through tall windows created patches of shadow they could use for concealment. "Here," Isabella whispered, stopping before a heavy mahogany door marked 12A. She produced her key card and pressed it to the electronic lock, then placed her thumb on the biometric scanner. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened, and Ethan wondered if Marcus had already changed the security protocols. Then the lock clicked softly, and the door swung open. Isabella's apartment was a study in elegant minimalism, high ceilings, hardwood floors, and carefully chosen furniture that spoke of both wealth and refined taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Potomac River, and original artwork adorned the walls between built-in bookshelves. But something was wrong. Ethan felt it immediately, that subtle wrongness that came from years of walking into potentially hostile territory. The apartment was too still, too perfect, like a museum exhibit rather than a lived-in space. "It's been searched," Isabella breathed, confirming his suspicions. She was right. To the casual observer, nothing seemed out of place, but Isabella knew her own space intimately. The books were arranged differently on the shelves. Her desk drawers weren't quite properly closed, and the kitchen showed subtle signs of intrusion. "Recently?" Ethan asked. "Within the last few hours. The coffee maker is still plugged in. I always unplug it before leaving." They moved through the apartment with careful precision, Ethan covering the angles, while Isabella checked for signs of what the searchers might have taken. Her laptop was gone from the bedroom, and several file folders that should have been in her home office had vanished. "The cookbook," she said urgently, heading for the kitchen. The shelves above the island counter held an impressive collection of culinary volumes, everything from classic French cuisine to modern fusion techniques. Isabella's hands moved directly to a thick, well-worn copy of The Joy of Cooking, its spine cracked from years of apparent use. But when she opened it, her face went pale. "It's gone." The pages had indeed been hollowed out to create a hiding space just as she'd described. But the space was empty, the encrypted drive nowhere to be found. "Marcus," she said, the name carrying all the venom of absolute betrayal. "Are you sure you put it there?" "Positive. I hid it there 3 days ago, right after I discovered the Nightfall files." Ethan examined the hollow space, noting the clean edges and the small pieces of adhesive that had once held the drive in place. Whoever took it knew exactly where to look. Which means Marcus has been monitoring me even more closely than we thought. The implications were staggering. If Marcus had the encrypted drive, he had access to Isabella's investigation into Project Nightfall. More importantly, he would know exactly how much she'd discovered and could plan accordingly. "We need to go," Ethan said. "If he has the drive, he knows we'd come here looking for it. This could be a trap." But Isabella was already moving toward her bedroom, determination overriding caution. "There might be something else. A backup I made before encrypting the main files." "Isabella, we don't have time." 2 minutes. I just need 2 minutes." She disappeared into the walk-in closet, and Ethan could hear her moving things around, searching frantically for whatever backup she'd hidden. He positioned himself by the window, scanning the street below for signs of approaching threats. What he saw made his blood run cold. The surveillance team that had been watching the building's entrances was gone. In their place, he could see tactical teams moving into position around the building's perimeter. Black SUVs were blocking both ends of the street, and figures in body armor were establishing sniper positions on nearby rooftops. "Isabella, we need to leave now." "I found it," she called back, emerging from the closet with a small flash drive. "It's not everything, but it should be enough to—" The apartment's front door exploded inward. The breach charge turned the heavy mahogany door into splinters and gave the assault team the element of surprise they'd been counting on. They poured through the doorway in perfect tactical formation, assault rifles raised and ready. But Ethan was no longer the broken-down mechanic they'd expected to find. His first shot took the point man's center mass, dropping him before he could acquire a target. His second caught the man behind him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his rifle clattering across the hardwood floor. "Get down!" Ethan shouted to Isabella, who dove behind the kitchen island, as bullets began chewing chunks out of the apartment's expensive fixtures. The tactical team was professional, well-trained, and heavily armed, but they were operating in unfamiliar terrain against an opponent who'd spent years learning how to turn any environment into a killing field. Ethan used every piece of furniture, every architectural feature, every shadow as cover and concealment. He moved through Isabella's apartment like a ghost. His shots precise and economical, each one finding its mark despite the chaos erupting around them. But there were too many of them. "Back bedroom," he called to Isabella, laying down covering fire as she sprinted across the living room. "Fire escape." More men were pouring through the shattered doorway, and Ethan could hear the distinctive whine of helicopter rotors approaching from outside. They had maybe 30 seconds before the apartment was completely surrounded. Isabella reached the bedroom window and began struggling with the security latches, her injured shoulder making the task difficult. Behind her, she could hear the staccato rhythm of gunfire as Ethan held off their attackers. "Almost got it," she called. "Hurry!" The window finally gave way, swinging open to reveal the fire escape she'd mentioned. But as Isabella prepared to climb through, a figure appeared on the metal platform outside. Marcus Webb stood there in full tactical gear, his familiar face twisted with a mixture of rage and satisfaction. The man she'd once loved, once trusted with her life and her heart, now held an assault rifle pointed directly at her chest. "Hello, Isabella," he said calmly. "I've been waiting for you." Behind her, the gunfire stopped abruptly. Isabella turned to see Ethan backing into the bedroom, his rifle trained on the doorway, where several assault team members were taking cover. "Standoff," Marcus observed. "How deliciously appropriate." "Let her go, Webb," Ethan said, without taking his eyes off the doorway. "This is between you and me." Marcus laughed, the sound devoid of any warmth. "Oh, but you're wrong about that, Sergeant Cole. This has always been about Isabella. She's the key to everything. The key to what your pathetic revenge fantasy, revenge." Marcus stepped into the room, his weapon never wavering from Isabella. "This isn't about revenge. This is about evolution. The defense industry is changing, and those who don't adapt get left behind." "You mean get rich selling weapons to terrorists?" "I mean get ahead of the curve. Autonomous weapons systems aren't the future, they're the present. The only question is who controls them." Isabella found her voice, though it shook with emotion. "You're talking about mass murder, Marcus. Those systems you're selling have killed innocent people." "Innocent people die in every war, Isabella. At least this way we're not risking American soldiers." "You're creating the wars." Marcus shrugged as if discussing the weather. "Supply and demand. We supply the tools, the world provides the demand." The casual way he dismissed human suffering sent a wave of disgust through Isabella. This was the man she'd once planned to spend her life with, the man she'd trusted with her most intimate secrets. "What happened to you?" she whispered. "When did you become this monster?" For just a moment, Marcus's facade cracked, revealing something raw and angry beneath. "I became what you made me, the dutiful husband standing in the shadow of his brilliant wife. Do you know what it's like to be introduced as Isabella Grant's husband everywhere we went? So you decided to destroy everything I'd built. I decided to take what should have been mine from the beginning. Grant Dynamics was supposed to be our company, our legacy. Instead, it became your personal empire, and I was just another employee." Ethan had been listening to the exchange while keeping watch on the doorway, but now he spoke up. "So you betrayed your country and got people killed because your feelings were hurt." "I saved my country," Marcus snarled. "Do you have any idea how many American soldiers would die in the next decade without autonomous weapon systems? How many families would lose sons and daughters to wars that machines could fight for us? You're deluding yourself. Tell me, Sergeant, how many of your brothers died in Afghanistan because they had to put themselves in harm's way? How many widows and orphans could have been spared if we'd had the technology to fight those battles remotely? The words hit Ethan like physical blows, dredging up memories he'd spent years trying to suppress. Images of fallen comrades, of flag-draped coffins, of families destroyed by loss. But then he thought of Amara, an 8-year-old girl murdered by one of Marcus's machines. Not at the cost of innocent lives, he said firmly. Innocent lives are already being lost. I'm just trying to minimize the casualties. By starting a war, Marcus smiled coldly. By ending one. The Defense Secretary's summit next week will see the largest gathering of military and defense leadership in decades. One precisely placed strike blamed on foreign terrorists, and Congress will have no choice but to authorize full deployment of autonomous weapons systems. The casual way he described mass murder made Isabella feel physically sick. You're talking about killing hundreds of people. I'm talking about saving thousands, maybe tens of thousands. You're talking about profiting from death. Profit is just a side benefit. The real goal is progress. As Marcus continued his twisted justification, Isabella caught Ethan's eye and saw him gesture almost imperceptibly toward the bathroom. There was a small window there, too small for the assault team to have covered, that led to the building's rear courtyard. But reaching it would require getting past Marcus. There's something else you should know. Marcus continued, apparently enjoying his moment of triumph. The encrypted drive you were so desperate to retrieve, I've been monitoring every file you accessed for months. Your little investigation didn't discover Project Nightfall, it was fed to you. Isabella stared at him in shock. What? We needed a credible whistleblower, someone with the right credentials and moral authority to legitimize the threat. Who better than the CEO of Grant Dynamics discovering evidence of corruption within her own company? You used me. I used your predictable moral outrage. We knew that once you discovered evidence of illegal weapons sales, you'd try to expose them. That exposure would create the perfect justification for a preemptive strike on the summit. The elaborate nature of the conspiracy was staggering. Isabella realized she'd been manipulated from the beginning. Her own investigation turned into a weapon against the very people she'd been trying to protect. Chen was never the real mastermind, she breathed. You were. Chen was a useful tool just like you. When he outlived his usefulness, Marcus shrugged. Well, let's just say his death served our purposes as well, by making it look like the conspiracy died with him. Exactly. Now you're starting to understand the scope of what you've stumbled into. Ethan had heard enough. While Marcus was focused on his gloating monologue, Ethan had been edging closer to the bathroom door. Now he made his move. His tackle caught Marcus off guard, sending both men crashing into the bedroom wall. Marcus's rifle went flying as they grappled, years of resentment and betrayal fueling their struggle. Go! Ethan shouted to Isabella as he fought to pin Marcus to the ground. Bathroom window! Isabella ran for the small window, but behind her she could hear the assault team moving into the bedroom. Ethan and Marcus were rolling across the floor, each trying to gain the upper hand, while tactical officers shouted for clear shots. The bathroom window was indeed small, barely large enough for a person to squeeze through. Isabella had to remove the screen and shimmy through feet first, dropping into the narrow courtyard behind the building. Above her, she could hear the fight continuing, punctuated by shouts and what sounded like furniture breaking. Then suddenly, a gunshot echoed from the bedroom window. Ethan! Isabella screamed, her voice carrying all the terror and desperation she felt. For a moment, there was no response. Then Marcus appeared at the window, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead, but very much alive. He put up quite a fight, Marcus said conversationally, but in the end, sentiment made him careless. You killed him. I defended myself against a terrorist attack. That's how it will be reported anyway. Isabella felt something inside her break at his words. The man who'd become her protector, who'd risked everything to keep her safe, who'd begun to mean more to her than she'd dared to admit gone. The grief threatened to overwhelm her, but beneath it burned something else, something cold and implacable that had been growing since she'd first seen the evidence of Project Nightfall's atrocities. Rage. You're going to pay for this, Chu, she said quietly. Marcus laughed. With what your evidence is gone, your protector is dead, and in 3 days, the Defense Secretary's summit will provide all the justification we need to reshape American military policy. People will figure out what you've done. No, they won't, because you're not going to be alive to tell them. As Marcus began to climb through the window after her, Isabella realized she had only seconds to act. The courtyard was surrounded by tall walls with only one exit, a service gate that led to the building's parking garage. She ran for the gate, her injured shoulder screaming with each step. Behind her, she could hear Marcus dropping into the courtyard, then the sound of pursuit. The service gate was locked, but years of corporate stress relief at an upscale gym had given Isabella more physical strength than most people realized. She threw her shoulder against the gate, ignoring the pain, and felt it give way. The parking garage was dim and echoing, filled with the expensive cars of the building's wealthy residents. Isabella ran between the rows of vehicles looking for anywhere to hide or any way to escape. That's when she heard it, a voice calling her name from somewhere behind her. Isabella. She turned, expecting to see Marcus or one of his tactical team members. Instead, she saw a figure emerging from behind a concrete pillar, moving with the fluid grace of a trained soldier. Ethan Cole was alive, blood on his shirt, and favoring his left side, but very much alive. How? Marcus always was a terrible shot, Ethan said grimly. And he made the same mistake Chen did. What mistake? He assumed I'd go down easy. The relief Isabella felt was so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. Without thinking, she ran to him, and he caught her in his arms, despite his obvious injuries. I thought you were dead, she whispered against his chest. Takes more than Marcus Webb to kill me, he replied. But she could feel the tension in his body, the way he kept glancing toward the garage entrance. We need to move, he said. I bought us maybe 5 minutes, but they'll reorganize and come after us. Where can we go? They know about Katerina. They have my evidence, and in 3 days we stop them. Isabella pulled back to look at him. How we have nothing. We have something they don't expect. What? Ethan's smile was cold and predatory. We have me really pissed off. As they made their way through the parking garage toward whatever vehicle they could commandeer, Isabella realized that something fundamental had changed in their dynamic. The careful balance between protector and protected had shifted into something else, a partnership forged in blood and betrayal tempered by shared loss and growing love. There's something I need to tell you, she said, as they approached a motorcycle parked near the garage's exit. What? The backup drive I found, it's not just evidence about Project Nightfall. What else? It contains the complete guest list for the Defense Secretary's summit, including security protocols, floor plans, and timing for all scheduled events. Ethan stopped in his tracks. You mean? I mean we know exactly when and where Marcus is planning his attack. And more importantly, we know how to stop him. As they climbed onto the motorcycle and roared out into the Georgetown morning, Both of them carried wounds that would take time to heal. But they also carried something else, a shared determination to prevent the massacre Marcus was planning, and a growing realization that they had found something worth fighting for in each other. The road ahead was uncertain and undoubtedly dangerous, but for the first time since this nightmare had begun, they were no longer just running from their enemies. They were running toward them. The Defense Secretary's summit was 3 days away, and Marcus Webb was about to learn that Isabella Grant and Ethan Cole were far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The final battle was about to begin. The Omni Shoreham Hotel stood like a fortress of power and privilege in the heart of Washington, D.C., its elegant facade hiding the most important gathering of defense officials in decades. 3 days had passed since Isabella and Ethan's escape from Georgetown, 3 days of careful planning and desperate preparation for what they both knew would be their final confrontation with Marcus Webb and the conspiracy behind Project Nightfall. From their position on the roof of an office building 2 blocks away, Isabella watched through high-powered binoculars as limousines and armored vehicles delivered the most powerful people in American defense policy to what Marcus intended to be their tomb. "How many?" Ethan asked quietly, his own scope trained on the hotel's multiple entrances. 47 confirmed arrivals so far. Defense Secretary Morrison, Joint Chiefs, Chairman Bradley, heads of all major defense contractors, key congressional committee members. Isabella's voice was tight with tension. If Marcus succeeds, he'll decapitate America's entire defense establishment in one stroke, and create the perfect justification for deploying his autonomous weapons systems nationwide. They'd spent the past 3 days analyzing every piece of information from Isabella's backup drive, cross-referencing guest lists with security protocols and architectural plans. What they'd discovered was a conspiracy more elaborate and deadly than either had imagined. Marcus hadn't just infiltrated Grant Dynamics, he'd positioned assets throughout the defense establishment, from security contractors to catering staff. The attack on the summit would appear to come from foreign terrorists, providing the perfect pretext for a massive expansion of autonomous weapons deployment. "Katerina's people are in position?" Isabella asked. Ethan checked his secure radio. "All teams report ready, but remember, we only get one shot at this. If Marcus realizes we're onto him before we can expose the conspiracy, he'll trigger the attack early and blame it on us trying to stop legitimate security measures." The plan they'd developed with Katerina's network of intelligence operatives was necessarily complex. They needed to simultaneously prevent the attack, capture evidence of Marcus's involvement, and ensure the truth reached the right people before it could be suppressed. "Movement at the service entrance," Ethan reported, adjusting his scope. "Catering van right on schedule." Isabella felt her heart rate accelerate. According to the intelligence they'd gathered, Marcus would use a catering company he controlled to introduce the autonomous weapons systems into the hotel. Disguised as service equipment, the killer robots would be positioned throughout the building before being remotely activated during the summit's main session. "I can see him," Isabella said, her voice barely controlled. "Marcus is supervising the unloading personally." Through her binoculars, she watched her ex-husband, directing workers as they moved innocuous-looking equipment cases into the hotel's service areas. To any observer, it would appear to be routine setup for a high-security event. Only she and Ethan knew those cases contained enough firepower to massacre everyone in the building. "Time to move," Ethan said, shouldering his equipment pack. They rappelled down the back of the office building, with practiced efficiency, their movements synchronized by hours of training over the past 3 days. Katerina had provided them with federal security credentials that would get them into the hotel, but from there, they'd be operating without backup in hostile territory. The Omni-Shoreham's service areas were a maze of corridors, loading docks and mechanical rooms that honeycombed beneath the hotel's public spaces. Isabella and Ethan moved through this underground world, with purpose, guided by architectural plans they'd memorized, and the distant sounds of preparation echoing from above. "First checkpoint," Ethan whispered as they approached a security station. The guard was one of Marcus's people, as expected. Isabella approached him with the confident bearing of someone who belonged there, her forged credentials prominently displayed. "Special Agent Morrison, Treasury Department," she said briskly. "We're conducting a final security sweep before the secretary's arrival." The guard examined their credentials with professional thoroughness, but the documents Katerina had provided were flawless. After a moment, he nodded and waved them through. "Impressed," Isabella murmured as they continued down the corridor. "Terrified," Ethan replied. "If you're that good at lying, how do I know when you're telling me the truth?" Despite the danger of their situation, Isabella found herself almost smiling. "You don't. You just have to trust me." Famous last words. They found the first cache of autonomous weapons in a storage room near the main ballroom. The equipment cases were larger than Isabella had expected, each one containing what looked like a sophisticated mechanical spider the size of a small dog. Their sleek black surfaces were broken by sensor arrays and weapons ports that spoke of lethal efficiency. "Jesus," Ethan breathed, examining one of the devices. "These are more advanced than anything in the military's inventory." Isabella was studying the control interface on the nearest case. "They're networked. Once activated, they'll operate as a coordinated swarm." "How many?" A quick count revealed 18 cases in this room alone. If each contained multiple units, the hotel could be flooded with hundreds of killer robots within minutes. "We need to disable them," Isabella said. "Negative. If we tamper with them now, Marcus will know we're here. We stick to the plan document, everything first, then prevent the activation." Isabella nodded reluctantly, though every instinct screamed at her to destroy the machines immediately. Instead, she photographed the devices and their control systems, while Ethan planted tracking devices that would allow Katerina's people to monitor their status remotely. They located 2 more caches in quick succession, one near the hotel's main kitchen and another in a mechanical room adjacent to the conference center, where the summit's primary sessions would be held. Each discovery added to the horrifying scope of Marcus's plan. "Estimated body count?" Ethan asked, as they moved toward their primary objective, the command center, where Marcus would coordinate the attack. "Conservative estimate, 400 dead, maybe twice that wounded. And that's just the immediate casualties." "And the political aftermath? Martial law, suspension of civil liberties, blank check for defense spending on autonomous weapons. Marcus will have succeeded beyond his wildest dreams." They found the command center exactly where Isabella's analysis of the hotel's layout had predicted, in a converted conference room on the mezzanine level that offered both security and clear sight lines to the main ballroom below. Through the one-way glass windows, they could see the summit participants beginning to take their seats for the opening ceremony. The room itself was a nerve center of electronic equipment, with multiple monitors displaying feeds from cameras. Throughout the hotel, stations, displays for the autonomous weapons systems, and what appeared to be a direct communication link to news networks. Marcus stood at the center of it all, orchestrating the final preparations with the calm efficiency of a battlefield commander. He'd changed from his tactical gear into an expensive suit that made him look like just another security contractor managing a high-profile event. "He's not alone," Ethan observed, counting at least 6 other operatives in the room. "Can we take them?" "Maybe. But once we go loud, we'll have maybe 5 minutes before his backup arrives." Isabella studied the command center's layout. Through her scope, her mind racing through possibilities. What if we don't have to take them? Explain. Marcus is a control freak. He'll want to personally oversee every aspect of the operation. If we can make him think the plan is compromised, he'll abort. Or he'll try to salvage it by accelerating the timeline. Either way, it forces him to react instead of execute his careful plan. Ethan considered this. What did you have in mind? Isabella's smile was predatory. Something Marcus will never expect. The truth. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, Isabella was moving. She strode directly to the command center's main entrance, her forged credentials in one hand and every ounce of CEO authority in her bearing. "Excuse me," she said to the guard at the door. "I need to speak with Mr. Webb immediately. We have a situation." The guard was clearly confused by her authoritative manner, but before he could respond, Marcus's voice cut across the room. "Isabella." She turned to see her ex-husband staring at her with a mixture of surprise, rage, and grudging admiration. Around him, his operatives were reaching for weapons, but Marcus held up a restraining hand. "Let her in," he said quietly. Isabella entered the command center with complete composure, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she could sense Ethan taking position to cover her escape, but she was committed now to a course of action that would either end the threat or get them both killed. "Impressive setup," she said, looking around at the electronic equipment. "Very professional." "Thank you. I'd offer you a drink, but I'm afraid you won't be staying long enough to enjoy it." "Actually, Marcus, I think you're the one who needs to leave." Her calm confidence clearly unsettled him. "Really, and why is that?" "Because in about 30 seconds, every news network in the country is going to receive a data packet containing complete documentation of Project Nightfall, including financial records, technical specifications, and video evidence of autonomous weapons testing." Marcus's face went pale. "Impossible. I have all your evidence. You have what I let you find. Did you really think I'd put all my eggs in one basket?" Isabella pulled out her phone, showing him a countdown timer. 20 seconds, Marcus. Time to choose, do you want to go down as a terrorist or just a traitor? You're bluffing. Am I check your news feeds? One of Marcus's operatives quickly turned to a bank of monitors displaying major news networks. For a moment, nothing changed. Then simultaneously, across multiple channels, breaking news alerts began flashing. Exclusive secret documents reveal illegal weapons conspiracy. Defense contractor accused of selling autonomous weapons to foreign actors. Project Nightfall, the conspiracy to militarize artificial intelligence. Marcus stared at the screens in disbelief as reporters began detailing the evidence Isabella had spent 3 days preparing. Financial records showing illegal arms sales, technical documents describing autonomous weapons systems, and most damaging of all, classified footage of the machines in action during overseas operations. Impossible, he breathed. Inevitable, Isabella replied. Did you think I'd learned nothing from being married to you? You taught me that, in a world full of predators, sometimes you have to become one yourself. The summit is being evacuated as we speak. In about 2 minutes, this building is going to be crawling with federal agents who will be very interested in all your surveillance equipment and weapons caches. As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the hotel. Through the command center's windows, they could see security personnel directing summit participants toward emergency exits in calm but urgent procession. Marcus's careful plan was collapsing around him, and Isabella could see the moment he decided to salvage what he could from the disaster. Activate the systems, he snapped to his operatives. All of them. Now. Marcus, don't. If I'm going down, I'm taking as many of them with me as possible. His finger stabbed toward the activation controls for the autonomous weapons network. Isabella realized with horror that even with the summit being evacuated, There were still hundreds of people in the building. Hotel staff, security, personnel, emergency responders. That's when Ethan made his entrance. The command center's rear entrance exploded inward as Ethan's breaching charge turned the reinforced door into scrap metal. He came through the opening like an avenging angel, his assault rifle already acquiring targets. The firefight that erupted was brief but vicious. Marcus's operatives were professionals, but they were positioned to observe and coordinate, not to fight a close-quarters battle against a special forces veteran with nothing left to lose. In less than 30 seconds, it was over. Marcus stood alone among the bodies of his men, his hand still reaching toward the weapon's activation controls, but no longer able to complete the motion due to the rifle pointed at his chest. "Step away from the console," Ethan ordered. "This won't change anything," Marcus said, but he complied. "You've delayed the inevitable, nothing more." "Maybe, but sometimes a delay is all you need." Isabella was already at the control systems, using her technical knowledge to begin shutting down the autonomous weapons network. "Ethan, I need 2 minutes to make sure these things can't be activated remotely." "You've got them." Marcus laughed bitterly. "You think this ends here? You think killing me will stop what's already in motion?" "Actually," Isabella said, without looking up from her work, "you're not going to die, Marcus. You're going to live a very long life in federal prison testifying against everyone who helped you." "I'll never." "Oh, but you will. Because Katerina's people have been very busy the past 3 days. They've identified every member of your conspiracy, frozen all your offshore accounts, and provided evidence to international law enforcement. Your choice is simple: cooperate and live, or stay silent and spend the rest of your life in solitary confinement. The comprehensive nature of their investigation clearly shocked Marcus. He'd underestimated not just Isabella's determination, but also her resourcefulness and the network of allies she'd assembled. "Done," Isabella announced, stepping back from the control console. "The weapons are permanently disabled, and I've uploaded their locations to federal security." Through the command center's windows, they could see tactical teams beginning to sweep the hotel, methodically locating and securing each cache of autonomous weapons. The conspiracy that had threatened to reshape American defense policy was being dismantled piece by piece. "It's over, Marcus," Isabella said quietly. Her ex-husband looked at her with something that might have been respect mixed with his hatred. "You've changed, Isabella. You used to be naive, idealistic. Now I'm what I need to be to protect innocent people from monsters like you." As federal agents flooded into the command center to take Marcus into custody, Isabella felt a strange mixture of triumph and exhaustion. The immediate threat was over, but the larger implications of what they'd uncovered would reverberate for years to come. "Come on," Ethan said softly, taking her hand. "Let's get out of here." They left the chaos of the hotel behind, walking out into the bright Washington afternoon like tourists who'd simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Around them, emergency vehicles and news trucks were converging on the scene, but no one paid attention to the injured man and woman making their way quietly down the street. "Where do we go now?" Isabella asked as they reached Ethan's truck. "Wherever we want," he replied. "For the first time in years, we're both free to choose." Isabella looked back at the hotel where hundreds of lives had almost been lost, where the future of American defense policy had hung in the balance. They'd prevented a catastrophe, exposed a conspiracy, and brought justice to those who'd thought themselves above the law. But more than that, they'd found each other. "I have a suggestion," she said. "What's that?" "There's a small town in Virginia that probably needs a new auto shop. The old one burned down a few days ago." Ethan smiled, the expression transforming his battle-worn features. "You want to go back to Millbrook?" "I want to go home with you." 6 months later, the sign outside the new garage read, Cole and Grant Security Services, and the small town of Millbrook had quietly become home to one of the most effective private security consulting firms on the East Coast. Ethan had returned to the work he'd always been meant to do, protecting people who needed protection. Isabella had discovered that her skills in corporate analysis and strategic planning translated perfectly to threat assessment and security consultation. But more importantly, they'd built something together that neither had expected to find, a love forged in danger and tempered by shared sacrifice. On Christmas morning, as snow fell softly outside their new home, Isabella stood in the kitchen making coffee while Ethan played with Lily, the 8-year-old daughter they'd adopted from a refugee assistance program. The little girl bore no physical resemblance to Amara, the child Ethan had failed to save in Afghanistan, but in her bright smile and trusting eyes, he'd found a chance at redemption. "Presents," Lily announced, bouncing with excitement. "After breakfast," Isabella called, but she was smiling. The normalcy of family life still amazed her after months of danger and uncertainty. Under the Christmas tree, wrapped carefully alongside the traditional gifts, was a small wooden box that Ethan had made in his workshop. Inside were 2 items that had become symbols of their journey: the bullet that had wounded Isabella during their first fight together, and a piece of twisted metal from Chen's destroyed compound. Reminders of where they'd been and how far they'd come. As they sat around the tree that morning, surrounded by the peaceful quiet of their new life, both Isabella and Ethan understood that they'd found something rare and precious, not just love, but purpose. Their work continued, helping others who found themselves threatened by forces beyond their control, but now they faced those challenges together. The past would always be with them in the scars they carried and the memories that sometimes haunted their dreams. But the future stretched ahead, bright with possibility, built on a foundation of trust, sacrifice, and unshakable devotion. In the end, what had begun with a car crash and a plea for help had become something neither had dared hope: for a second chance at life, love, and the opportunity to make the world a little safer for the innocent. The mechanic had found his warrior princess, and she had found her protector. Together, they were unbreakable. As Lily tore into her presents with the uninhibited joy of childhood, Isabella caught Ethan's eye across the room. In that shared glance was a lifetime of understanding, a promise that whatever dangers might come, they would face them, as they had learned to face everything else, together. The love story that had begun in violence had found its happy ending in peace, but it was a peace they had fought for, bled for, and earned through sacrifice and courage. In the small town of Millbrook, where it had all started, Ethan Cole and Isabella Grant had finally come home.